when it comes to having a good relationship with sleep and just my business in general, the goal is for me to be able to help families have a little bit more of the knowledge and not feel like, okay, I got my child sleeping through the night for the next 2 weeks. Now what happens? I always like to give my families a little bit of extra support by giving them some next steps guides. I like to educate and I like to give them the education piece behind baby sleep because I do feel like that is what's going to set them up for success for the future. So they don't feel that it's necessary that they need to have a sleep consultant for their entire children's lives. My name is Melissa Gund. I am the owner of the Rested Little Nest. I am a certified pediatric sleep consultant and a mom of two amazing babies. I started sleep consulting about 6 months ago when I was in the thick of my postpartum days with my son, and I help families achieve their sleep goals.
First of all, thank you for so much for taking the time to come on. Secondly, when you reached out, I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a miracle," because we've been having significant sleep troubles with my daughter. Third, I'm really we were chatting beforehand, and I'm really happy to hear and you've only been in business for 6 months, but you were saying things are booming,
Yeah,
and I wanna talk about that at first.
sure,
Just in this first before we get into what you do and how it works, I wanna talk about why you think actually, let's talk about how your business works and what you do for families.
sure.
But then this I want the piggyback question that I have is, why do you think so many families are having trouble with sleep?
Yeah. So, how I started and kind of how my business operates and what I do. So, basically, what happens is I get families that reach out to me. They are looking for sleep support. So, whether it be they're having trouble with overnight sleep, or maybe they're co sleeping and they want to transition into cribs or a bassinet, or maybe they're struggling with naps. Or maybe they just kind of want to find a schedule that works best for their family. I take a more gentle approach and I focus on those schedules and I focus on making sure that the babies and, your toddler, or I work with babies from newborn to age 5. So depending on what age range we're at, I want to make sure that all of their needs are met during the day so that they don't have to wake up on the overnights. So that is kind of how I take my gentle approach. First of all, I'm sure you hear all the time of if you've heard of sleep training or sleep consulting, the first thing you hear is, well, I'm not making my kid cry it out. And that is so not what I do and so not what I practice. So when families or parents reach out to me to try to get their children to sleep through the night, I'll make them a custom sleep plan. I will take an assessment from them top to bottom to hear about everything that they're doing. So, what their schedule currently looks like, what is their goals, what are they trying to accomplish? And then from there, I'll write them a custom sleep plan. I'll speak to them and we'll do a consultation, usually about 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on what our goals are. And then I have a client portal that I get to track everything with my families, and we speak for 2 weeks. And here I am in the middle of the day. I'm accessing their nap schedule, their feeding schedule. If it's their toddlers, we're talking about the approaches and the ways that they're trying to put them down for a nap. Same thing with bedtime. So I'm able to, in real time, make tweaks and adjust their schedules and their daytime needs as needed. And then on the overnights, I'm kind of coaching them and walking them through what they need to do for the next steps.
Very interesting, and it
Yeah.
sounds very helpful for a lot of families because it being that we're in the thick of the toddler, newborn stage, a lot of our friends are also, so we kinda compare stories and which I thought would be a blessing, to be honest with you. In fact, one of my closest friends, our kids are now, 11 days apart, the
Oh,
second
how
kids,
exciting.
and I was like, "This is gonna be great, we're gonna be able to talk about everything going." It sucks because like, if one kid sleeps more than the other, you're like, "How come their kid's sleeping better than my,"
Yeah,
you know,
what's
so
going on here? What are we doing wrong? And a lot of the times it's actually not that. It could be your baby's temperament is different. It could be a health condition that you're unaware of. It could be something as simple as reflux. It could even be, the difference between what mom is eating if they're
Sure,
nursing.
interesting.
And it could also be just the simple fact that every baby is different and you could be holding your child a different way than what your friends are doing. So there's so many other approaches to it and so many other reasons behind why sleep happens. And it is so, so important. There's so much science behind baby sleep. And I could talk about baby sleep for hours.
One of the things I'm curious your opinion on this, before we even get I know I wanted to ask about, like, common reasons to why kids aren't sleeping,
Yeah.
but I'm curious your opinion on everybody knocks social media, so I don't want to get into that topic so much, but
Of
there
course.
because of the influencer world we're living in, and this one size fits all, taking care of baby concept that
Yes.
everybody baby has
Yes.
to, one thing we're trying to remind ourselves is that they're not robots, and every baby's different, and we
Exactly.
even if we compare my daughter to my son, they're both different. They're going to be different. Temperament, sleeping habits, eating habits, preferences, and we
Absolutely.
forget that. And I'm curious your opinion on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As far as when you are looking at social media and when you are looking at the influencers' help, or you're looking at something as popular as taking care of babies or full feedings or moms on call, all of those approaches and all of those methods are fantastic. But what happens there is that they are one size fits all methods. So it's a great starting point, but then what happens from there at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's no longer working? What happens when you are now trying to move up to the next schedule? Or what happens if your baby doesn't follow the schedule exactly the way that it's written out on a piece of paper? That's where I come in. And that's why working with somebody one on one is actually more important because what ends up happening is how are you supposed to adjust your schedule? If something works for your daughter and not necessarily for your son, and something may work for your son and not it didn't work for your daughter, how are you supposed to navigate those challenges? So that's why I think it's super important to work with somebody on a more one-on-one scale and having that one-on-one support, because on paper it could go one way, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you're doing butt taps and you're shushing and do I place a pacifier? Do I not place a pacifier? Do I feed them? Do I not feed them? How am I supposed to know all of these challenges? And you can't get that from a piece of paper. So that's why I think it's super important to kind of have that one on one support. But having those as tools as a starting point is great. But you just don't want to be married to it because, like you mentioned, babies aren't robots, they're humans.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to eat more than other days, just like us. Sometimes they're just a little extra sleepy, just like us. So that's honestly probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give, especially to new parents, is you have to remember that they are humans and we have to teach them everything. We need to teach them the difference between day and night. They don't know any better.
Mm. Yeah, I think what you're saying is really, really important for people to remember the fact that how come he's acting differently than yesterday? Because we all do, and we forget that,
Exactly.
and it's so easy to put them in the category of robots, but they're not.
Yes.
So I'm really, first of all, happy for you that your things are
Thank you.
cranking for you. But why do you think that is? What's the secret behind the sauce? And
So I think what's kind of exploding for me is that I'm also a mom of two babies. So I have a 3-year-old and I have a 9-month-old at home. And I am just very, very relatable. I'm also very much somebody that is going to be as flexible and as fluid as you are. So if you come to me and you tell me, hey, listen, Melissa, we're really struggling with sleep, but I still really like to co sleep. I'm not going to be somebody that turns around and says to you, co-sleeping is bad because of X, Y, and Z, and you need to follow the CDC guidelines for X, Y, and Z when it comes to co-sleeping. No, listen, you are the parents at the end of the day. You are going to make the call. I'm just your GPS. You are the driver. So if you tell me that you want to hit a certain goal, I'm able to adapt a lot of my practices and a lot of my gentle approaches and my plan to get you there, just like a GPS would.
Mm,
So,
yeah, very interesting. That's a great analogy, actually.
yeah,
Do you think that people have always had trouble with their children sleeping, or do you think that it's changed, that life's changed? Or I'm curious your opinion on that, because not only I'm sure your services are great, but there's a mass of people that need these services now, as
absolutely.
which was proof as why you're so busy. So why do people need these services? And
I
has it always been that way?
I think that people need services like this, and I don't necessarily know if it's always been this way, but I do think that the generation of parents that we have right now, and I know you and I can kind of relate with this, is we are way more invested in our kids' times. And in addition to that, we're way more educated. There's so much information out there, and a lot of it is. It could go back and forth on, is it good education? Is it bad education? But there is education there for us. And I think even going back to our parents' generation or the generation in between us, there were only two options. It was you make your kids cry it out and you make them figure it out, or the ever known Ferber method, which is you put your kid down and you go back in and you check on them every couple of minutes, let them know that you're good, and then you walk out. So now that there are approaches and we've been able to find ways to tweak this, and people are now realizing that you can have your kids sleeping through the night as young as 6, 7 weeks old, people are interested. People want that. And on top of this, parents are both working. We don't have just the mom at home anymore. So now there's a lot of working moms out there that are absolutely sleep deprived and exhausted, and they need to have the sleep. They need to have their
Very
children
interesting.
sleeping on the overnight.
That's a really interesting difference. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah,
That's
no, but it
fascinating.
it really it's just I feel like because our generation has changed so much, we've also needed to adapt so much. And with that comes learning the proper ways to get our children sleeping through the night, but having a healthy relationship with sleep with that. So that's something that I like to focus on is making sure that your children have a healthy relationship with sleep because if they have a healthy relationship with sleep, they're going to want to go to sleep. You're gonna be able to teach them how to go to sleep. So that's kind of how I take that approach and
What does a
why.
healthy relationship to sleep look like?
So they're happy to go to sleep. You are putting them down awake when it comes to making sure that you put them down in a place that they know that they're going. So I always like to use the analogy, think about if you were to fall asleep somewhere. So I always say this and everybody laughs, but think about if you were in college and you black out, right? You pass out somewhere and then you wake up and you have that sheer panic. Where am I? What's happening? And you just kind of have that like ball of anxiety. That's exactly what happens with your babies when you are rocking them to sleep. So you rock them to sleep, they're nice and comfy in mom and dad's arms. You go and you do a super little quiet transfer as best as humanly possible. You sneak out of the room, and then boom, 20 minutes later, they're awake and they're panicking. And they're like, where am I? I'm now in a crib that I don't remember falling asleep in. Where's my mom? I was just sleeping in her arms. I need to be comforted. So it's the exact same thing. If you put them down awake where they are alert and they understand where they're falling asleep, they're going to stay asleep longer because it's an independent choice for them to fall asleep there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions because I'm living this out at the same time. So
Exactly. It's nice when you're living it because you can also kind of I'm sure, like, the light bulbs are going off for
sure,
you a
and
little
well,
bit.
particularly because we have a newborn and like trying
Yep,
to navigate this season, but also like in hindsight with my daughter and what that looked like, and we definitely rocked her to sleep when she was a baby, but then also she was a great sleeper for 2 years.
incredible.
Like, just say put her down, say, "Good night, love you," and she'd say, "Love you," and "Good night," when she's
Yeah,
just started learning to talk, and we'd close the door and she'd be wide awake, she'd sing for 10 minutes and fall asleep, right? And then all of a sudden it changed, but that's a different story, but, it's just interesting to think about all these different things,
yeah,
and I'm really, really fascinated, that, just the concept of how society has changed, and then the nes because of how society has changed, the necessities has changed. Just going back
for
to
sure.
the working mom briefly, like,
Yeah,
because there's so many more working moms, they need more sleep than possible before,
absolutely.
um, and not that staying at home is any easier, but
No,
it is a different story when you have to get up at 6 AM every day or 5 AM to get on the train. It's very different,
absolutely.
and that is and therefore you find necessity is the mother of all invention.
Yep, and I
It's
will
fascinating.
say, even working moms, when there are working moms, stay-at-home moms, however you see it, the moms now, I feel like we have and I can speak to this again as a mom with 2 kids, we now have to put all of the puzzle pieces together all of the time.
Meaning what?
So, when you're a stay-at-home mom, you are making sure that the house is clean, you're, doing, like, the housekeeping, you're making sure that the kids are there, but because of social media and this idea of the stay-at-home mom also needs to make sure that your kids are socialized, but then you also need to make sure that you're doing everything possible at home. And then, now everybody is also trying to contribute to society in a way. So if you're a stay at home mom, you're also still a working stay at home mom. There's a lot of content creators that are also working stay at home
Hmm,
moms. So it is just this constant need to be on. And now our needs, the first one is sleep. How are we going to be able to successfully give ourselves and give our best selves if we're not getting enough sleep at night? So this is where a lot of us moms need to kind of put our foot down and be a little selfish and say, I need to make sure that I'm getting 8 hours of sleep at night. But I can't do that if my child's waking up, especially if I'm exclusively nursing at 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m. And a lot of times there's a common misconception that nursing moms aren't able to get the sleep on the overnight, which isn't the case. As long as your baby is getting the needs that they need during the day, they're going to be able to do longer stretches on the overnight, which in turn is going to let mom, who's putting all of the pieces together all the time, start with a full cup in the morning
Mm,
and not so much a drained cup from being up every 2 hours.
sure. I want to piggyback really briefly on what you said, contributing to society. That's a really interesting concept that is I agree with, and there's definitely I don't know if the word is pressure or
Yes.
societal change, and I'm curious just your opinion on that because I think you phrased it really really well,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the pressure of moms needing to contribute to society, I think that there is so much on social media that shows that moms just do it all. You know, they show their get ready with me schedule starting at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's just not everybody's reality. It's going to be you need to have the ability to not only keep your kids alive and healthy, right? But you also need to worry about yourself too. And you need to be able to take care of your self care. But that ends up falling on the wayside because we have this need to contribute to society all of the time. It is just this constant hamster wheel that you can't get off of anymore. And I think it's unfortunate. I wish that we could, go back 20, 30 years without a social media world where we could just focus on the things that mattered and not even so much the making sure that we're looking great to go to Pilates at 7 a.m. and then getting coffee with a friend and then making sure that our kids are socialized every hour on the hour and having an activity to do instead of just letting them be kids.
You're speaking to a core dilemma in my life at the moment, where, as I mentioned, like, I gave you the bottle of wine,
Yeah.
as a thank you, but, like, I live relatively close to a homesteader style life. I have
Yes.
my own garden, I hunt a lot of my food, we make our own sourdough, like, we do a lot of things at
Incredible.
home. That being said, I question God a lot, saying, "Why was I born in this generation as opposed
Yes.
to 60, 600, 500, 200 years ago?"
Yeah.
Like, I love all that stuff.
Yes.
Why am I here? Like, and of
It's
course, he put me here for a reason. So
so
that's not I'm
true.
not questioning it on a grade
Yes,
level, but at the
yes,
same
but
time,
so
like,
true.
I envy the look, I guess the simplicity of survival is the way I wanna
Yes.
say it. Like,
Yes.
up until probably at post World War II, so prior to World War II, the world was all about survival. Much harder lives than we're living. I am not diminishing that in any way. We can't even
Absolutely.
comprehend how hard that life was, but it
Yes.
was so much simpler,
Oh my
and I
gosh,
envy that
yes.
simplicity
So
just a little
true.
bit. And I don't know, it's just that's a tangent of mine that
No,
I
but really it's so, so true. What a different world. And you know what? I have to be honest. I bet probably pre-World War II, they didn't really care how their kids were going to sleep. They didn't care if they were being put down on their
just
back.
the fact that
They
they stayed
didn't
alive.
exactly. They didn't have a sound machine setting with red light and they didn't have all of these things. But at the end of the day, here we are now and we're in this technology world and we need to start utilizing what we have and we need to utilize it in the best way that we know possible, which is I know for a fact that putting a sound machine in your kid's room that's less than 50 decibels is going to help block out any barking dogs or any trucks that drive by or anything to that extent. So we need to utilize the technology that we have in the best way possible. But man, what I would do to be able to just go back and not have to worry about it.
The irony of it is I'm like, I just wanna crawl under a rock and forget social media. Meanwhile, my entire income comes from social like, between
Right?
the podcast, between I run a photo and video company for, like, businesses where I do social media work for business.
Okay, yeah.
Between that, that's all social media work, this, and then I manage a YouTube channel that is the 3rd leg of
Yep.
my income. Like, it's all social media, like,
It's
and it's
all
ironic that
social
I'm like, "I
media.
just wanna crawl on the rock. I hate social media," but then all of my income comes from social
Comes from
media.
social media, right? Like
So it's so
we have
weird.
to we have to switch with the times. We really
Oh,
do,
man.
but it's so
Um,
true.
Piggybacking really briefly, I have a couple questions that I
Yeah.
wanna ask based on what you were saying, but piggybacking briefly on the sound machine,
Mhm.
I have a personal disdain with the sound machine, and I'm curious
Tell
your
me.
opinion. We never use one for my daughter ever. We more so recently when she started having issues. My wife would use it during naps. I wouldn't use it
Okay.
during naps. Again, we spoke because like of our schedules, like where like we split childcare.
Yep, yep.
So on days when I had her, granted, the house was a lot quieter because I'd be in my studio,
Of course.
with the with the monitor, so it would be quieter.
Yep.
But even still, if the dog bark or whatever, she wouldn't wake up. My wife was more of an advocate of the sound machine, so she could do things louder. We have started using one for her to sleep overnight, but I was also just I just recently came across the 50 decibel thing.
Yes.
That's actually way quieter than you think.
It is so much quieter than you think.
Way so I put it on. I took out a decibel. So we didn't really speak beforehand. I have a background. I'm a musician by trade.
Okay.
So I know a lot about music and sound machine, blah, blah.
Right.
So I took out a decibel reader and was like, "Oh, wait, like, even on this quiet setting, this is still, like, 85 dBs." And I'm like, "We really gotta take this," 'cause, a lot of my friends and even for a while when she was having a really, really hard like, we were cranking that thing, and I can't even imagine how it probably was 200 dBs. It was crazy.
It's so funny. So a friend of mine, when it comes to like the sound machines and the settings and stuff, I had a friend of mine and she was asking me to come and see her sleep space. So I said, yeah, of course, like I was at her house hanging out with the kids. So I go in and I look at it and I turn her sound machine on and it's at 100%. And I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, why is it at 100%?" And she's like, "Well, I need to block out everything." And I said, "I promise you, if you turn this down just a little bit of white noise, because the reason that sound machines were invented were to mimic the sounds of the womb. So it was never solely quiet. So, in order to, again, go back to teaching a healthy relationship with sleep, you want to mimic the womb. So this is how the snoo was created, which is, the bane of my existence, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with what the snoo is, but it's a moving bassinet.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So if your child cries on the overnight, it automatically starts to
Oh,
move.
yes, yes, yes.
So now it's teaching them that they need movement to go to sleep. But when it comes to a sound machine, because they are so used to not sleeping in pure silence, a sound machine is going to block out any of the excess noise, but it's also going to kind of give them that little bit of peace of mind and give them a little bit of sense of what they were used to in the womb.
So my question though, this is my
Yes.
frustration with and I'm not a professional in this. You're the professional. I'm just asking questions then
Yeah.
because the 2 questions that I have were, 1, she's 2.5 now.
Yep.
She's not a newborn. I understand the concept of a newborn wanting movement because they were in the womb and
For
also
sure.
wanting the noise because they were in she was it's been 2.5 years since she's been in the
Yep.
womb.
Yep.
That's my one caveat with it. The second concern, I guess, is that I come from the mentality of, like, the constant stimulation. It's a
Mhm.
constant brain stimulate. Your brain is constantly hearing something, and to some degree, like, it's almost if I were to hit a single piano note every day constantly, at some point, my daughter's brain will will shut off that pitch.
Shut it off, right.
And, like, my concern is, like, they're hearing the same sound for 12 hours every single night, not including naps.
Right.
Is that doing something to their brain where they're gonna end up shutting something off that and is it their brain still hearing things, so therefore it's
Right.
working when it shouldn't? I don't know, and
Right.
that's my concern.
So, and I think it's a valid concern too when you think about it with the sound machines and you think about as you start getting older and you start, now progressing into adult-like sleep cycles and you start, you know, now having these adult-like bedrooms, right? So if you think about it, once your children hit that like 3 years of age thing, chances are they're either going to be on a floor bed, they're going to be in a twin bed, they're not going to be in a crib anymore, and that's going to be their childhood room. So, with that being said, although when it comes to sound machines, there is a chance that it could be something that not necessarily that they rely on, but it's just something that they're used to. And it now is something that they're just kind of like, not that they're necessarily shutting it off, but it's just kind of something that they have in their back of their mind. If you think about it, there's a lot of adults that still use sound machines.
Sure.
I mean, I still use a sound machine to sleep now, but I will say that I never used to use a sound machine. But what I did do was I had the TV on. I had the TV on all night.
Fair,
I
okay.
always had a blue light
Sure.
on from the TV or I was scrolling on my
Yeah,
cell phone, right? We all have
it's
these
just
things that we
changed.
need to do
That's fair.
to tell our brains that it's time for us to go to sleep. So now, as our generation is, we were the generation of, you're hiding in your room on your cell phone at 1 o'clock in the morning, or maybe you were a lucky one that had a computer in your room and you would be up, chatting with your friends at 1 a.m. It's pretty much the same concept of that there's always going to be something that is teaching and triggering you to go to sleep. Like gone are the days of sleeping in a pitch black room with pure silence. It just doesn't really happen anymore,
I guess.
you know?
I guess I was just born in the wrong century.
Yep, there it is again. But if you think about it, I mean, just think about an alarm clock. Alarm clocks used to just be something that sat on your nightstand, now it's on our phones.
Mm,
I mean, I think I've met one person over the last 10 years who actually still uses a regular alarm clock because they don't want their cell phone in their room. But even, just people keep their phones on for emergencies, and we just always have access to the technology. So it's not even so much that it's going to be detrimental to them or that it's going to now be a sleep crutch for them. It's just the better of the evils, if that makes sense.
interesting,
And if you
interesting.
also think about it too, it depends on what the sound is. So, like white noise, brown noise, something like wind, something that's going to be a consistent sound isn't going to necessarily affect them as something like rain, where there's a change in the movement, change in the sound. A lot of sound machines nowadays have like lullabies and stuff on them. A lullaby is not going to be what keeps your kid asleep at night. It's going to be something that is just that consistent
Mhm.
low sound. And that's why the 50 decibels are so important because you want it to almost be that low humming noise, almost like a fan on, you
Yeah,
know?
that's exactly what I would
Yeah.
equate it to. I was wildly surprised with how quiet it was. I was like, "This is
Yes.
supposed to keep her like dog war." I was very surprised, and
Yeah.
because they say anything above what I was reading is anything I think above 80 is like a concern for their hearing.
For their hearing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and like 80 is also not that loud either.
No.
So it
No,
was
it's really
very
shocking
interesting.
when you actually see how quiet it truly is. But just again, like think of it, equate it to it's the summer, you don't have central air and you have a fan on overnight. It's the
Or
exact
an
same
AC
thing.
unit.
Or an AC, right? If you have an AC in your window and it's going to kick on, or the heat. If you have
Yeah.
the heat that kicks on the overnight.
Alright,
So it's
fine,
very similar.
touche. I'm curious, let's go take it way back to the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah,
On put a little bit more of a business side, you talked
sure.
about how you set up your business and how you have now these ways to communicate with the clients,
Yep.
patrons, parents. You also have ways that you can track all their information. Like, what did that setup look like for you? You decide you want to do this, you get all the certifications, you start the business, and things start getting busy. But like,
Yeah.
what does the backbone of the business look like?
Yeah, so the backbone of my business, I would say, really starts from where you get your accreditation more so than anything else. So I was very lucky. I got my accreditation through IPSP, which is the only accredited sleep consulting certification. So the owner Violet, she had the ability to get everything set up for success from the jump. So she provided me with an app that I was able to
Oh, wow.
utilize, which was incredible. So the app is called Rested, and it's really great because it's the ability to work service provider to family. So I was able to kind of have all of that set up for me. And then from there, I took a really different marketing approach than most other sleep consultants would, where I kind of just started offering services for free. I said, listen, I'm going through this certification. I am learning.
Mm.
I am learning. I want to learn more so than on just my own two kids. Because let's face it, like I mentioned, I was in the thick of postpartum. I had a 3-week-old son, and I said, I need to figure this out. Granted, I was super grateful. He had a couple of medical things going on. He had CMPA, which is, the milk protein allergy. He had reflux. And I was still able to get him to sleep through the night at 7 weeks old.
Wow.
So it's really awesome to be able to kind of know like okay I can kind of test some of my theories on my own children, but I wanted to make sure that it worked with other families as well. So I went out to some of the local mom groups. I went out to my daughter's daycare and I said, look, I
Wow.
want to help people for free. In return, I want honest feedback, and if you want to write me a testimonial, great, and if you don't, I completely understand. And I found that I was having 100% success, and I said, okay, I must be onto something here. So then from there, I started doing heavily discounted sleep plans, and I slowly transitioned that way. And then from word of mouth, it just kind of exploded.
I
And
mean, I have 15 people I'm like, "Hey, you gotta check this," because my buddy he's a 6-month-old, and they're trying to figure out the whole sleep she was never a good sleeper, and they're trying to figure I'm like, "Dude, you gotta" I'm like, "I have a million people
yeah, and
it's everybody that has a kid, man."
exactly. And I do think that it also helps that, again, just back to how things are so different, even from 15 years ago, parents were having children in their early to mid 20s. Whereas now we're so lucky that science has improved so much that we're having the ability now that you can have families in their 20s having kids and families in their 40s having kids. So I think that there's also a bigger variety with the ability to have more families for me to help with sleep.
Sure, yeah,
So I think that I've been able to reach a larger audience from
mm,
that as well too, which is really nice.
yeah. And let's be it, the 20 years old has a lot more energy than the 40-year-old, so
Oh,
the
yes.
reality of the 40-year-old having a child, they need the sleep more than anybody,
They're
you know?
exhausted. Yes, yes, very much so, so
I'm curious, how do you scale this? What does that look like? What does scalability look like? Because particularly because you're, like, the only business owner, right? Like,
yeah,
you're the you wear all the hats. What does
yeah.
scaling look like?
So I think scaling for me looks like I actually started a sleep community and I just started this community. It's very new. I currently have 12 families involved in the community, which I absolutely love. And I think this is going to be the future of sleep consulting. And as I'm starting to transition into this phase of this community that I'm building, it's more about sleep regulation rather than actually training your children how to sleep. It's making sure that their bodies are regulated enough that they are able to go back to having that healthy relationship with sleep. So the community is going to be that they still get the opportunity to work one-on-one with me. I still give them sleep plans. We still go through this coaching and we still go through this support, but you also now have a community of other families who are going through the same struggles as you. Or maybe they're 10 steps ahead of your struggles and they can give you some advice from their struggles. And I post videos on Q&As and I'm showing them sleep tips. How do you properly rock a 10-week-old? How do you properly put a child down in their crib? How do you successfully do gentle parenting with the ability of walking out of your 2-year-old's room without making them scream and bang down the door for you to come back for bedtime? So having these conversations, and then we also do weekly Zoom calls, and I also am hosting
One-on-one
events
or
with
group Zoom calls?
groups. Yeah, so I do Zoom calls in group sessions. So they have the ability to, again, share their struggles, but also share their wins. And it's really nice to know that you have a community behind you because a lot of times now everybody looks and talks about their village and it takes a village, but sometimes their village isn't existent anymore, or it's not the same village that they thought that it was going to be.
Mm,
So it's really nice to have that community of families who have a lot of relatability. Like you mentioned, you and all of your friends are going through this right now. So talk about the relatability and giving tips and tricks to each other
yeah,
and tips and tricks that they've learned from me.
yeah.
So,
Very interesting.
yeah.
So, what is the actual structure, if you could, like, break it down a little more of the groups? So, like, and then
Yeah.
how do you even scale that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say the structure of my sleep circle community. So it starts as this, is you.
Your alliteration, I have to say, is very good.
Oh,
Yeah, the
thank
sleep
you.
circle, the
Y-
very good. I like it.
Thank you so
As a
much.
songwriter, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, she's really the branding on this stuff is good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I tried. So when it comes to the sleep circle, what happens is they register to come into the community. I have a full assessment for them to fill out. Tell me your struggles, tell me your goals. What do you want your wins to look like? What is your realistic time frame also?
Mm,
Because that's something that a lot of families don't realize is that there does need to be a realistic time frame around it. You're not going to have your children sleeping through the night in 3 days if your baby is 2 months old. Is there a potential that, depending on if you take a more aggressive approach, and again, not cry it out, but more of an aggressive approach rather than the gentle side, maybe you'll see faster results. But again, it's all about the temperament and it's all about what kinds of tweaks that we need to make. So I have them fill out that assessment. And then once they fill out the assessment and then they come into the community, they get a one-on-one 30-minute session with me. We do it over Zoom and we go through everything. We go through what the sleep environment looks like. We talk about the approaches that we're going to take when it comes to naps or adjusting their schedule or their overnight sleep or all of it. And then from there, I tell them what their next steps are going to be. So that's when I give them their plan. Then they come into the community, it's a private group, and that's where they have the ability to see things like monthly schedules. They have the ability to see some of the common Q&A questions that are happening. I provide them with how much sleep their children should be having in a 24-hour period. And then from there, they also have the ability now to connect with other family members. And after they have access to all of these things, they'll also then have access to exclusive discounts. So working with me one on one. And this is where I think the scaling piece is going to come in, is because even when you're in this community and you have all of the support, sometimes you do need an extra handheld or you do need a little bit more of one on one support. And then that's where my custom support would
mm,
then come into them, but they do get that discounted.
very interesting. You've mentioned quiet out several times, and it doesn't, the vibe I'm getting, it doesn't seem that you're the biggest fan of it. And I'm curious your opinion on it.
The cry it out method, I don't believe in at all. I don't believe that it is necessary for you to put your child down in a room independently and then say, "Have a good night. I'll see you in the morning," and let them just figure it out. I don't think it's healthy for their regulation. I don't think that it is healthy for them as they grow up. When it comes to separation anxiety, I do think that the separation anxiety does come into play a lot, especially when they hit regressions. So, whether it be the 18-month, the 2 year, the 2.5 year, 4 years old, when you start to have that social separation anxiety piece kick in, a lot of times, and there's been a lot of studies about cry it out, that what ends up happening is that if they have this initial fear that they need to just kind of figure it out independently, that they're not going to have a parent support or that nobody is going to come in and help them. So I always like to take the approach of, you are going to be there to support your children through this. We are going to teach them a positive, healthy relationship with sleep, and having them cry themselves to sleep is not going to be the positive way to
Mm,
do that.
very interesting. Just a quick question. So there's a 2 year and a 2.5 year sleep
Yes.
regression. I think my
Yes.
daughter was in one long regression for the 6 months, and ironically, since the past 6 days, something shifted, and we've been getting much better sleep.
Excellent. I love
We
to
still
hear
have to
that.
sit in her room until she falls asleep, which I'm
Okay.
not thrilled about. We've been doing that for a while, but
Okay.
forever she just sat. We just said, "Oh, good night," and then she started with the whole separation anxiety. It was
Yep.
a whole weird. It was separation anxiety. Didn't want us to leave. Whatever. We did the Ferber originally, like
Okay.
when she like at 6 months old.
Yep.
Ended up working very well,
Works
very
great.
quickly.
Yep.
For a year and a half, it worked, and then we did the Ferber again for the first couple of months of that, and it kind of worked. And we tried all these other things, sitting in her room, then progressively moving the chair farther and
Yep.
farther,
Yep.
that
You
didn't
did the
work. It was
chair
a whole, and
method.
then she woke up. Then she started waking up in the middle of the night like several times.
Looking for you.
Yeah, or just even I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then we'd have to do the chair again so now
In
it
the
was
middle of
4
the
o'clock,
night.
4
Yeah.
times in a night. We were sitting there for 30 minutes till she fell asleep. We were nobody sleeping. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden recently she started with night terrors, which she
Mm.
hasn't had in a week or ish, give
That's
or take.
great.
I think it was exhaustion related.
It could be.
Um,
It's very common.
but I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm not
Yes.
even looking for an answer because I'm not
No. And
your
but let me
services. I'm just
but
talking
listen,
about
but
life.
let me tell you, so as simple as your wife was very pregnant, they know what's happening, they know what's coming.
That was the ironic part. She turned 2 right around the time my wife was, 5 months pregnant with
Yeah.
that's so I had another, I think a family therapist on the show, and
Yeah.
one of the things that she said that I found super fascinating was the fact that their brains can't comprehend what it means to become an older sibling.
Yes.
And so you start saying, "You're gonna be a big sister. Oh my gosh, there's a baby in mommy's belly," and they don't get it, and they don't get what that means. So then therefore and they think they might understand it during the day, and at night, their brain is now trying to process what they don't understand, and they can't, and therefore they wake up, and therefore it scares them or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And that's also played a role into it, which or made us started it. So, but
Absolutely. And then if you think about it, then the baby was born and the baby is here. And if you got, it sounds like we're very similar in the sense that you probably tried to overcompensate a lot to get her involved, or to kind of make sure that she wasn't feeling left out, or that, like, we want you to help, we want you now to help with this new baby. And then what ends up happening is the newborn stays up longer than the toddler does, especially in the beginning. So now here comes our FOMO babies who are like, wait a second, how come that baby gets to stay awake and now I have to go to bed?
wait,
I
the
don't like
newborn or
this.
the
The
toddler
toddler. And now the
stays up later, you're saying?
no, the so if you think about it, you're gonna put your toddler to bed at what, 7, 8 o'clock, and mom might still be nursing or feeding the baby, or mom is now in the baby's nursery, or mom is in the bedroom with the baby, and it's, "Wait a second, how come mom still gets to be with the baby? What about me?"
Yeah.
So, this is where a lot of that, "Wait, but I want mommy, I want daddy. How come" "No, you need to stay in here with me until I go to sleep. I need to make sure that you're here."
Mhm.
So, a lot of times too, it's not even so much a jealousy piece, but it's more so really a FOMO piece of, how come they get to stay and get and spend time with mommy and daddy? Why do I have to go to sleep?
Yeah.
So that also tends to be a shift, and that's pretty common around like the 3 to 4 week mark when you have a new baby at home, and then it does slowly start to taper off. So you're pretty much kind of at the right time frame with it, like, slowly stopping, but you just don't wanna make bad habits,
Well, sure,
which
absolutely, which we tried I mean, it's been 7 months of
yeah.
everything, but and it was all these different things, like, okay, it'd take an hour and a half to get her down, but once she was down, then she'd sleep the
She
night.
right.
Then she stopped sleeping through the night, and then she was fighting us for everything. She was fighting us to go to sleep, or she was and I and when she
Yep.
in the middle of the night, she'd be fighting us about sleep, and then she'd be afraid of her room, and then it was a million like, it was like, we figure out one thing, and then it was like whack-a-mole with
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
so then we got to this point where, like, it was like, "Okay, at least she's not fighting us if we just sit in her room."
Right.
So at least that we could spend a half an hour just sitting there, like, it was the lesser of all evils.
Absolutely.
Then she started waking up even in the middle, it was just I don't know.
Yeah.
So then the kicker was when she was waking up more than my newborn was, and I'm like,
Yes.
"This is not right."
Yeah. And that's typically what ends up happening is that they are now so disrupted with
Mm,
their sleep that all of a sudden it's not the newborn that's giving you the hard time, it's the toddler. So how do you fix it? How do you kind of revert it back to what it's supposed to be? Games. Toddlers love to gamify everything.
mm,
So we're going to play a kissing game. If you lay in your bed and you close your eyes for 10 minutes and mommy and daddy leave the room, we're going to come back in and give you a kiss goodnight. If you stay in your bed all night, you know what's going to happen? Mommy and daddy are going to come back in and give you a kiss in the morning.
mm,
Gamify everything. Make it exciting, make it fun. They feed off of your anxiety, especially when it comes to sleep. But again, you want them to have this good relationship and you want them to be excited about going to sleep. So, if mommy and daddy are going to come back in and give me a kiss in 10 minutes, if I lay here really silently in my comfy bed, I'm so excited to just lay here because I know they're going to come back.
very interesting. Now do you
Yeah.
come back if they fall asleep?
Yeah.
Oh, you still
Absolutely.
go back and get
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Go back in, give them a kiss, and then see you in the morning.
Alright, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not doubting, I'm just saying
Yeah, no, it's a concept that I think we've also lost where it's, you kind of feel like, all right, again, lesser of all evils,
yeah,
we'll just sit here. Like we don't have to be finding the lesser of all of the evils when it comes to baby sleep. What we can do is we can try to find the positive approaches
yeah.
and give them the
And
healthy
I
relationship.
see that truth in so she started like we were talking briefly that she started a little, I don't know, school thing.
Yeah.
It's like not even it's 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, right?
Yep.
It's 9 to 12, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Uh, the first day she was fine, the second, third, fourth, fifth, hated it. Like, I don't want to go to school separate. I want mommy kind of thing.
Yep.
We gamified it. Well, if you go to school, you know what you get after? Yeah, you get a cookie. And she's like, "A cookie?" And, like, and then you would just constantly reinforce, "Oh, you're so excited for school, you're gonna get what do you get after?" "Oh, I get a cookie,"
Yep.
so, like, now she gets it, and now she's no problem. She loves school now, and
Absolutely.
it's interesting that I wonder how we can,
You can do stickers. There's also a stuffed animal game that you can do if you're if your daughter's getting to the point that she's afraid that mommy and daddy left the room, you can say, well, guess what? You know how you could tell if mommy and daddy leave the room? We're going to put a stuffed animal on your floor every time we come in and check on you. And then, after she falls asleep, you go in one time and you put 4 or 5 stuffed animals on the floor. So if she wakes up on the overnight, it's like, oh, mommy and daddy did come in a couple of times and checked on me. And then she gets to grab her stuffed animals. So again, it's all about that like positive reinforcement, especially with toddlers and choice. You want them to
autonomy.
have a choice.
That was what the other lady was saying. She was saying that we as humans want autonomy, meaning the ability to choose, and
Yes.
it really is particularly strong with toddlers that you have to give them a choice of rather than, "Hey, you're having an apple," it's like, "Do you want an apple or an orange?" Without being, like, overly,
Yep.
"Hey, well, what would you how would you like to spend your day?" It's like, finding the balance
Exactly.
of, like, "Okay, well, otherwise you're just gonna fight with them your whole life, so."
Exactly, and that is something that we've found as parents with our daughter is to be so successful. So we're in the thick of potty training right now, and do you wanna walk to the potty or do you want me to carry you to the potty? You're going to the potty, but how are you getting there? You
Yeah,
get to choose. And so the same thing comes with sleep. So, okay, you're gonna go to sleep. Do you wanna wear your Miss Rachel pajamas or do you wanna wear your butterfly
mhm,
pajamas? Giving them that sense of choice, or do you want me to put you in your bed or do you want to walk to your bed? So, same thing, giving them that sense of choice. You're still going to sleep right now, but how do you want to get there?
yeah.
So,
It's very fascinating. So I
yes,
have now a couple, like, direct Q&As relating to sleep and
sure.
relating to toddler thing that I think might help the listeners. What are 3 things to avoid related to sleep for children?
Ooh, I love this question. So, 3 things that I would absolutely avoid when it comes to sleep and babies is number one, no screen time 2 hours before sleep. You want to decrease cortisol levels and blue lights as much as possible. So, one thing that you can do instead is maybe you can listen to a story. If you have like one of those Tony boxes or like a dream machine or or even reading a regular book with them, something that's going to be a low stimulating activity for them that is going to help them start to calm down and regulate for bedtime. And then you can also put a red light in their bedroom that'll help increase melatonin. But also, as they get older, you can utilize a red light. Okay, red light means it's time for bed.
Mm,
Green light means it's time to wake up for the day. So if you have a toddler who's waking up in the middle of the night and trying to find you or coming into your room,
mm.
the light is red. You have to go back to your room. When the light is green, you're allowed to come
That would
out.
definitely work. My daughter totally understands that concept.
Yes.
So that's an interesting one. I got
Yes,
yeah.
for sure. The second thing that I would absolutely avoid when it comes to sleep with babies is going to be swaddling when they are starting to roll. So at the 4 month mark is when you'll start to notice, it could even be a little before that, you'll start to notice that babies have the ability to kind of like roll onto their sides for safe sleep and for SIDS purposes. As soon as you start to notice that your children are starting to kind of do that rolling motion, you want to start transitioning them out of a swaddle right away because it'll also help them as they start to get older with their startle reflex that they're not going to feel that they need to be confined. So, doing the transition before you notice the rolling, like the actual true rolling, is going to make a difference for sure.
Transitioning to like a Merlin suit kind of thing, or
No Merlin
tell me,
suits.
I
Merlin suits are just like the snoo for me. So you want a sleep sack that is going to be completely hands-free. So not even one that it kind of looks like a chalk outline where their arms are up like that, because those end up becoming something called sleep props. And a sleep prop is something that your children are going to need or have a sleep association with, where they're not going to be able to fall asleep independently. So you want something that their arms are completely out for. I always love a good halo sleep sack because they also have the sleep sack swaddles that you can kind of Velcro around their stomachs. So you have an easier transition because then you can put one arm out, you can put one
Mm,
arm, you can just do their hands free. So you want to make sure that you're transitioning them into a sleep sack, no loose blankets, no pillows. All of that is not good for safe sleep.
sure. And what's the third thing to avoid?
The third thing that I would say that you should avoid when it comes to baby sleep is going to be rocking your child to sleep. If you're rocking your baby to sleep, what ends up happening is that they are now used to only motion to fall asleep. So you can rock them to a point that they're comfortable and they are drowsy but awake. But you want to make sure that they are put into wherever they are sleeping. So whether it be you're still co-sleeping, they're in a bassinet safely on the side of the bed, if they're in a crib, if they're in a toddler bed, if they are 3 years old and still are, you still like to snuggle them before bed, as long as you are putting them in their bed, awake enough that they understand where they're falling asleep, then you're not going to have an issue with something called like false starts where they're waking up after 20 minutes. They're not going to have that panic looking for you. They are independently putting themselves to sleep. So
Mm,
that's why we should avoid rocking at all costs.
very, very interesting. It's interesting how I guess science changes things, and what
Yes.
was has worked for thousands of years, you realize it's actually maybe not the best thing.
Yeah, and although rocking may have worked for thousands of years, it could still be something that you can still do throughout the day. You can still snuggle your kids. You can still rock them at bedtime, just as long as they are not physically falling asleep in your arms and independently falling asleep where you want them to sleep on the overnight, and for naps too. That's what's going to set them up for having a healthy relationship
Mm.
with sleep.
Next question is, I don't know what I meant by this one. Tips to set kids to sleep. I don't know what that means.
Tips to set
I
kids to
don't know what I was trying to
sleep.
say with that.
Okay, so maybe you mean like a bedtime routine?
I guess, yeah, sure. Let's talk
Okay,
bedtime
we'll
routine.
talk about bedtime routines. So, I would say some tips for a bedtime routine are as simple, keep it simple. You don't want this to be something that you've now drawn out for an hour, hour and a
Mm,
half, right? 30 minutes or less. And start from day one. So, whether you, and it's never too late to start either. So, let's say that your children are now 18 months old and you've never had a bedtime routine. It doesn't mean that you can't start now, but something that is going to start teaching them an understanding on, okay, it's time for me to start calming down. It's time for me to start getting ready for bed. So it could be something as simple as You are putting lotion on them, especially if you have a baby with sensitive skin. Start the lotion from day one so they don't fight you on it as a toddler.
Mm,
So you could put lotion on them. You can put their pajamas on them. Maybe you play like some quiet music in the background. Maybe you read a book or two. You can now move into the room that they're going to be in. Same thing. You want it to be in the environment that they are going to fall asleep in. If you are still bottle feeding, nursing, you can do a nursing session or a bottle feeding session. Unpopular opinion. I don't care when the last minute is that you feed your baby, just as long as they're not falling asleep while they're eating, it doesn't matter. Um,
so that's also a no-no.
so falling asleep while you're eating is a no. Yes, because then again, they're waking up in the middle of the night. What are they looking for? They're looking to eat. They fell asleep while they were eating. Now it's a sleep association. So how are they supposed to fall back asleep if they're not
Yeah, there's
eating?
a lot of things we have to change. I'm, like, kind of embarrassed at the moment.
You're gonna go home to your wife. You're gonna be like, I learned so many things.
I don't know. I don't want to really say anything because it's
Listen,
also not the end of the world. Like
I
I'm
was gonna
getting six,
say,
7 hours anyway.
and also don't fix what's not broken, right?
Hmm,
Because that's the other thing too. A lot of families hear things and they say, "Oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong? Oh my gosh, well, I've been letting my child fall asleep while I was nursing them and they slept 12 hours." Don't fix what's not broken because
interesting.
at the end of the
But
day,
then are you creating bad habits though? Like, what does that look
you
like?
could be, but also at the end of the day, if you're creating a bad habit, you can just
I ju-
bring me on and I'll teach you how to fix it, right?
Touche.
So at the end of the day, listen, your children are going to go off of whatever you're teaching them because you are teaching them literally everything,
Sure.
right? Like you have to teach them the difference between day and night up
Oh.
until they're 6 months old. Their natural circadian rhythm doesn't even kick in yet. So they only know it's nighttime because you're teaching them that
Hmm.
it's nighttime. So and that's something that you can kind of keep when it comes to your bedtime routine as well. So, you want to keep it simple and you want to keep it short so you don't start creating bad habits down the line. But also, if you do create bad habits down the line, it's not something that you can't unteach them, you
Hmm.
know? So, I would say doing a nice little bedtime routine, something small, pajamas, read a couple of books, feed them just as long as they are not being fed to sleep. Keep them upright for a minute if you need to, and then you can lay them down where they're going to sleep. And then now they know that it's time for them to go to sleep. You can put on their sound machine and their red light so they know, okay, it's time for me to go to sleep. You put them down, and then you'll see them again when they wake up.
Fascinating. Um, let's talk regressions.
Okay.
What's the best practices for handling regressions?
So there are two different types of regressions, and a lot of people don't realize that. So there is going to be a developmental regression, but then there's also going to be a sleep regression. What ends up happening is developmental regressions always tend to correlate around what are called leaps. Now, I'm not somebody who follows leaps. There's a lot of people that follow leaps. I follow wake windows. Wake windows are, a very common term nowadays when it comes to baby sleep. But when it comes to developmental regressions, if you're extending their wake windows by 15 minutes from those developmental regressions, and when I say developmental regressions, I mean they're starting to sit up independently, they're starting to roll over, they're starting to crawl, maybe they're standing independently, maybe they're getting teeth. Maybe they're going to say their first words. What ends up happening is that their brain just wants to practice these things all day long, and they're waking up in the middle of the night to practice said
Wow,
things.
interesting.
Yeah. So if you extend their wake windows by 15 minutes, that should ultimately completely kick out any
So
developmental
you're exhausting
regression.
them essentially.
Not necessarily exhausting them, but you're adjusting for the regression itself. So when you extend their wake windows for the additional 15 minutes, because listen, let's be honest, we're not going to be people that are like, oh, I didn't put my kid to sleep at 7:02. Like now they're going to be up all
I know
night.
some people like that,
Yes.
and
It,
it's
it's hard.
scary.
It's hard to live like that.
But they do, but I don't know if it's considered living. I just this is my
It's
opinion.
no, it's
It's
so
my
true,
opinion.
and you also have to think about it too. At the end of the day, your children are gonna be as flexible as you make them. So, if your
That was a
child can
priority when we were raising
yes,
our kids.
yes, and if your children only know how to fall asleep at 7:02 while they're eating with their sound machine and their red light, and there's no flexibility whatsoever in this, they're not gonna be flexible kids. So, another practice, which is a little bit of a tangent, but another practice that I do is up until the first 6 months, I try really hard to teach my families to let your children nap anywhere. Anywhere and everywhere. You want them to be able to take a
Mm.
car nap. You want
Yeah,
them
yeah,
to be
sure,
able
yeah,
to be baby worn. And
yeah.
especially if you have older kids. How are you going to expect to be house locked to now be battling nap times at all these different times for your toddler and then your middle one and then your newborn, you know? So if you teach your children to sleep anywhere during the day in the first 6 months, you're going to, again, give them such a healthy relationship with sleep that they're going to be able to be those kids that fall asleep at a parade at 8 o'clock at night because you want to be there, you know?
Yep. That's a great piece of advice, that something we definitely implemented really well, and it was really helpful that
Yeah.
we didn't have to leave every party at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because our daughter had to sleep.
Had to go take a
But
nap.
I know
Right.
people like that, and it's sad to me because it's like you first of all teaching, I think that, like, bad personally, bad habits is too much structure because
Yeah. Too much
we have
structure
access to
isn't
all
good.
these ideas of structure, but then you're just creating like a little OCD kids,
Exactly,
and
and
that's scary.
that's it is, and that's why I always like to tell families when it comes to things like regressions and following wake windows, you need to give yourself a 30-minute buffer. No ifs, ands, or buts.
What does that mean?
If you are going to stray from the wake window time, that is the amount of what a wake window is your children are able to stay awake for X amount of hours before they get overtired or undertired, overstimulated, understimulated. And then that's when they start to do things like fighting sleep, waking up on the overnights. They stop eating as much. And it really does kind of affect pretty much their entire day to day. But you want to give yourself a 30-minute buffer because number one, every baby's temperament is different. You can see a 2 hour wake window on paper, but you know that your child has the ability of staying awake for 2.5 hours. So again, it all comes back to, do you really want to follow paper or do you want to know the temperament of
Yeah,
your child?
following kids' cues.
Yes, exactly. So, learning what your children's sleepy cues are is one of the first things that I will teach you. And then from there, you then need to go off of wake windows and get a general understanding of what those wake windows look like for your kids. And then when it comes to the regression piece, if you're extending that wake window by 15 minutes, because as your children get older, their needs change and they have the ability to stay awake longer. And that's where the regression piece does come in. So, if you're extending your wake windows by 15 minutes, you'll then now have the ability to have them grow with their wake window. They'll be able to grow with their developmental regression. And now it becomes a progression instead of
Mm.
a regression.
We talked about the developmental regression. What's the other regression?
The sleep regression. So, when it comes to an actual sleep regression, they do happen typically around the 6 month mark, the 9 month mark, the 12-month mark, 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years, and 4. So, with sleep regressions, what ends up happening is your children now have a little bit more awareness around them. So, 6 month sleep regression, a 4 month regression, people kind of confuse this one. They always think that that's actually a sleep regression, but it's not. It's a developmental regression. That's usually when they're rolling, starting to potentially sit supported, and their brain development happens so fast. But when it comes to the actual sleep regression side, what ends up happening is they have a lot more awareness of where they are, and they're starting to have a general understanding of locations, which is why it's so important for them to be put down to sleep awake
Mm.
as opposed to falling asleep, in your arms and then doing a transfer. So when it comes to these actual sleep regressions, what ends up happening is when they have that more awareness, you need to be able to adapt for that awareness. So that's where, again, extending the wake windows comes in. Maybe it's time for them to drop a nap. Maybe they are now getting too much sleep on the overnight or not enough sleep on the overnight. So this is where it kind of comes in, where how much sleep can a baby get in a 24-hour time frame? And then that's where those regressions come in.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So, is there
of
anything you
course.
want to cover that we haven't talked about that you recommend, that you want to share with the audience?
I I don't think so. I think that when it comes to having a good relationship with sleep and just my business in general, the goal is for me to be able to help families have a little bit more of the knowledge and not feel like, okay, I got my child sleeping through the night for the next 2 weeks. Now what happens? I always like to give my families a little bit of extra support by giving them some next steps guides. I like to educate and I like to give them the education piece behind baby sleep because I do feel like that is what's going to set them up for success for the future. So they don't feel that it's necessary that they need to have a sleep consultant for their entire children's lives. And for every regression, they say, okay, I need help again. Now what? So I like to set them up for the
Very
future.
interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and wrapping it up, one question I like to ask all the guests is,
Yeah.
what is something that you know now in your career that you wish you knew when you first started out?
That Every family has different sleep needs, so that no matter what my sleep needs are, it may not be the same as my needs, and that every child is different, every temperament is different, and not every method is going to work the same for everybody.
I think that's great advice, and I think
Yeah.
that 90% of America with children could hear that because
Yes.
it really troubles me, just not even like, not in a judgmental
Of
perspective, but
course.
just in, like, it makes me sad that so many people are trying to fit their kids into this box, and it's not gonna work,
Absolutely.
and they're driving themselves and likely their kids in the future crazy by
Absolutely.
trying to make them.
Again, everything you see on social media, perfect kids, perfect sleep, perfect eating habits, everything. And every baby is different, every person is different, and our kids aren't robots. And we need to have the ability to make them flexible and make them adapt and adjust. And that starts with having a good relationship with sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank you
you
for
so
sharing.
much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It was so
Absolutely.
great to be here. Thank you for having me.